2023 from your Anchorage Symphony Orchestra and Words on Music. I'm Susan Wingrove-Reed, and we're going to chat a bit about the upcoming concert Latin Vistas, which will bring light to the darkness of January. First off on the program is a piece by Moncayo. His older brother was his first teacher when he was 14, and at 17, he attended the National Conservatory. Later on, he was to have a long, productive relationship with American iconic composer Aaron Copland. They exchanged ideas and were wonderful friends. To pay for his conservatory time, by the way, he played jazz piano in nightclubs around the city. Politics, both national and academic, interfered in 1934. There was a new president of Mexico who appointed a chief of fine arts who was a bitter enemy of composer and conductor and teacher Carlos Chavez, who was fired as the head of the conservatory. So the composition class ended. Four close friends, including Moncayo, carried on in their own way and arranged their own concerts to do their own music. I love their independence. Moncayo got scholarships to study in the United States, and he ended up at what became Tanglewood, where he met Leonard Bernstein and was able to work with him also. Jose Pablo Moncayo is recognized as one of the three top leaders in Mexican nationalism in the first part of the 20th century. And he was a busy pianist, composer, percussionist, and conductor who sadly died young at the age of 46. Huapango, the title of the piece, is a Mexican folk dance from the Gulf of Mexico and a musical style played by a small group of instruments, usually like a violin and two different guitars, up to a full mariachi band. It's danced on a wooden platform. In 1941, Carlos Chavez, who is now the conductor friend of Moncayo, asked him to write a piece based on the popular music of Veracruz area for the Symphony Orchestra of Mexico. So Moncayo and his friend found a village where the music was preserved in a very pure form. And he stated, "We collected melodies, rhythms, and instrumentations for days. The transcription was difficult because the Huapangos never sang the same melody two times in the same way. I got great advice on my return. Introduce the material first in the same way you heard it and develop it later with your own ideas." There's a brilliant use of percussion instruments which enhances the dance in this piece. And at the premiere, Moncayo played piano and percussion at the concert. He used three traditional huapangos in what has become his best known, beloved work. It's bright and fun with soaring melodies full of joy. French composer Darius Milhaud stated, and I think this will resonate with Alaska audiences, "When in the gray light of a Parisian winter, I want there to be sun in my flat, and I listen to a recording of Huapango." Second on the program of Latin Vistas is a work by Gabriela Lena Frank. She's one of the world's most significant female composers, according to lists that have been compiled by reviewers for the Washington Post and many, many, many different institutions. Frank was born in California. She's Peruvian, Chinese, and Lithuanian in background, and has traveled a lot in South America. She earned her doctorate from Rice University. She's a member of Yo-Yo Ma's Silk Road Ensemble and gets commissions constantly by major orchestras and chamber ensembles. She lives in the San Francisco area, and she, a few years ago, started a farm with her husband and founded a music academy for young composers. In 2020, she was awarded the prestigious Heinz Award, which carries with it a $250,000 cash prize for weaving Latin American influences into classical constructs and breaking gender, disability, cultural barriers in classical music composition. She's also someone who is very committed to civic outreach, volunteers regularly in prisons, visits hospitals and does music there, visits schools, is a climate activist in the music industry, and has been a New York Times columnist writing about her hearing loss. She's also been a composer in residence for major orchestras, and this year, her first opera will be premiered. Her music has been described as glorious and brilliantly effective by countless reviewers and fans. Gabriela Frank said, "I think that music can be seen as a byproduct of my always trying out how to figure how Latina I am and how gringa I am. There is no single Latin identity. And there's usually a story behind my music." There are 3 parts to 3 Latin American dances, of course, and the first is titled Jungle Jaunt, which is an homage to the symphonic dances from West Side Story at the opening. And then there are a variety of dances and harmonies and rhythms throughout the movement. Second is Highland Harari, which is an Andean ancient bamboo flute song to accompany one dancer in its traditional form. There's a melancholy sound, it's mountain music. And there's a fast middle section which represents a spinning top possessed by the deity of thunder and lightning and rain. There are references to the music of Bartok in this movement. The finale, Mestizo Waltz, is a tribute to the mixed race music of South American Pacific Coast. It's a lighthearted popular song and dance, and it's a pun on the Mephisto Waltz of Romantic composer Franz Liszt. Mephisto was a son of Satan from medieval mythology, and Faust sold his soul to him in the German legend. So it'll be a real treat to hear this virtuosic conclusion to the set of 3 marvelous dances. Next on the program is something magical by Spain's most beloved 20th century composer, Manuel de Falla. His mother was his first teacher, and he did piano studies in composition and piano in Madrid, where he condensed 7 years of conservatory study into 2 years. But as talented as he was, he felt that there were limitations on what he could continue to learn and experience at home. So he moved to Paris, and at this time, he was able then to have coffee and chats and change ideas with Ravel and Debussy and other innovative young artists, but remain grounded in remembering all of the beautiful music from his own country. When World War I began, he went home to Spain, and he became recognized as a nationalist. He collected and crafted settings of traditional folk songs. He was an incredibly slow worker and composer. He published only 15 works during his lifetime. He was also deeply religious and solitary and a bit of a hypochondriac. David Ewan, one of my favorite contemporary musicologists, wrote that Falla was a mystic who sought to explore the soul of Spain. In 1909, when he was in Paris, Falla wrote home to his parents to ask them to send him a set of reproductions of landscape paintings by Catalan artist Roussenol, The Gardens of Spain. These were extremely popular landscape paintings of famous gardens, and gardens in Spain had been important to Spanish life for centuries, providing respite and beauty, places to have parties, and just to live a rich life. He drafted some piano nocturnes, solos called night music, inspired by studying these reproductions of the paintings, but he was encouraged by friends to develop an orchestral tone poem from these pieces. Albéniz, a fellow pianist and composer in Spain, said, "Well, what about an orchestral work with a dominant piano part?" He finished the score in 1915 during World War I and referred to it as Symphonic Impressions. It is not a piano concerto, but the piano is an essential part of the tonal fabric and a virtuosic member of the orchestra throughout, evoking places, sensations, and sentiments. Consider that there are long, sensual nights in a place where everyone stays up late and the pace slows after dark. And that's a bit of the atmosphere of this amazing piece. It's atmospheric, hypnotic, rich with colors, moody, and mysterious. The three sections of Nights in the Gardens of Spain all focus on different gardens. The first, the Architect's Garden, a 14th century palace in Granada, features this amazing space. It's very elegant and gorgeous and classic. The piano sometimes just has a simple individual line in the middle of this. And the piece at this point was heavily influenced by Debussy and Impressionism. The second main idea in the Architect's Garden was found on the streets of Madrid, where Falla heard a blind fiddler play the tune, and he incorporated this melody in this magical movement. The second garden is called Distant Dance, and it's sensual in a flamenco style. It speeds up and gets louder, and then it fades into the distance. There are whirls of Malagueña dances within this wonderful movement. And the finale, which then proceeds without a pause, is named Sierra Cordoba, and it's devilishly dramatic. In the middle section, the piano plays a florid flamenco-style melody in the high range over a throbbing bass. And the final 5 minutes roar with expansive romance and then fade to a quiet Spanish dark evening close. The grand finale for our Latin Vistas concert is a work originally by Sylvester Revueltas, and he was born on New Year's Eve in 1899 in Mexico. Violin was his first passion. He actually came to the United States on 3 different occasions to study, in Chicago, in Austin, and then he was involved with a theater company. In 1929, he was the assistant conductor for Carlos Chavez, who we mentioned earlier, related to the Moncayo piece and working with studies in the conservatory. He was a very famous conductor and composer. And he founded his own orchestra. Revueltas wrote music immersed in studying the traditions of his country, but he never quoted folk sources. And he famously said, "Why should I put on boots and climb mountains for Mexican folklore if I have the spirit of Mexico deep within me?" He had a rift with Chavez and the music establishment in his country, so film scores became the focus of his career, and he composed almost a dozen of them before he died tragically young. In 1937, he had gone to Spain to support the Civil War effort with poets and artists, and after the trip, he became an alcoholic, troubled by self-doubts, and anguished at world politics. La Noche de las Mayas is a 1939 film score about pre-Columbian heritage. He wrote 36 sequences of music to already edited film work so that the pieces were just added in after it had all been done. This was one of his last scores, and the movie was shot in Yucatan in the jungles and focused on the Mayan culture. It was about a traditional tribe living their life as they wished to do in a traditional way, but then a collision with the modern world and an Indiana Jones type explorer, which led to tragedy at the end, both cultural and romantic. Poet Octavio Paz wrote a tribute to Revueltas, saying that he had deep felt yet joyful concerns for men, animals, and things, and a profound empathy with his surroundings, which makes the works of this man, this composer, so naked and defenseless and hurt by the heavens and the peoples, more significant than many of his contemporaries who were writing at the same time. The suite that the Anchorage Symphony will play was put together by a conductor named José Lamantour, and there were some alterations to the music from the film. There are 4 movements to the piece, and Lamantour said, "I took every imaginable liberty." The exciting conclusion of the piece concludes with exotic and numerous percussion instruments, and the ASO will feature 12 percussionists playing all the instruments, and some of them even get to improvise in this final movement of the piece. We are very grateful to the Atwood Foundation for their generous grant that has enabled us to purchase some of the instruments, the unusual traditional instruments that were needed for this piece and will undoubtedly be used in the future, but also provide us replacements for some of our worn out instruments and repairs on some of our percussion instruments. So our audience for Latin Vistas is going to get a treat of wonderful, up-to-date sounds of both old and new percussion sounds. Thank you, Atwood Foundation. Revueltas had said, everything is rhythm in nature. My rhythms are booming, tactile, dynamic, and visual. The piece, the suite, the version of his film music that we are going to perform was produced in 1961. It has the shape of a symphony. The first movement is a ritual, brooding evocation of traditional history. The second movement is a scherzo that dances, rustic sounds interrupted by urban partying. The third movement is a nocturne, a night song, an evening song. And the fourth movement, with all the percussion on display, is called Night of Enchantment. And it's a melody and variations that in the Los Angeles Philharmonic program notes, I had to share their concluding statement. It's a sacrificial frenzy that exhausts itself in an orgy of percussion. So on that note, I hope that you are really excited to attend Latin Vistas. We are excited to join with you because the audience is such an integral part of what we do when we're playing from the stage. So happy 2023. Join us at your Anchorage Symphony Orchestra, and there are wonderful concerts yet to come.